Halloween. So in today's video, I'm gonna be watching 5 horror films that I've never seen before, including my very first introduction to slasher films. I thought it would be fun to turn a project I did last year into a bit of a tradition, where every October I will watch some horror films that I missed out on, never saw because I wasn't really allowed to watch horror growing up, and then I thought I didn't like horror for a long time. I'm now discovering it, and I want to watch some of these iconic films that I've never seen, and some of these new films that I just thought were too scary for me. Before we jump in, I need to give credit where credit is due. A lot of the inspiration for this video came from Stephanie from the Books in the Freezer podcast. She was a guest on Chapter 3 podcast, which is a podcast I co-host along with a couple of my friends. And Stephanie and I did an episode on where to start with reading horror, but for patron bonus content, we talked about horror films, and I asked her some questions about where to start with slashers, because I realized I've read some books about slashers, but I have never actually seen a slasher film, and she definitely helped me out. So I'm gonna tell you my list of 5 films that I'm planning to watch for this video project, and I have already watched one of them, so I'm gonna tell you my thoughts. For a patron movie night, we're gonna be watching the original Halloween from the 1970s. Very excited for that one. That'll be a watch party. I'm also planning on watching I Know What You Did Last Summer. I remember when this and all the Scream movies were coming out when I was growing up, and I just was never allowed to watch them, and so I'm gonna do it now. And then after that, I am planning on watching Final Girls from 2015. This is kind of a horror comedy that is playing off the final girl trope from slasher films. So I figure I should watch a couple slasher films before I watch the film that's making fun of slasher films. Then I'm planning to watch What We Do in the Shadows, which is a mockumentary following a coven of vampires. It's another one that's like a horror comedy. And then the final film on this list is the one that I have already seen. This is The Cabin in the Woods. I watched this one a few days ago, and it was really interesting. I remember when this movie came out and everybody was talking about how it was like really like bizarre and mind-blowing, but also scary, and I was like, I don't know if I can do horror. This seems like it's gonna be too scary for me, and so I never saw it, but I was always intrigued by it. It is really interesting. Do I want to rate these movies? If I do like a 5-star, what would my rating on this be? So this was a really fascinating concept, and I kind of liked the way that it had 2 different POVs that you're switching back and forth between, because it built tension in this interesting way and kind of made you ask questions about like, wait, what is really going on here? How is this all working? So if you haven't seen it already, Cabin in the Woods follows this group of young people who are planning on kind of escaping into the middle of nowhere for a weekend in this cabin in the woods, but weird stuff starts happening. And then we keep flashing back to this group of people who seem like scientists maybe, or like maybe they work for the government or something, who are running some kind of an experiment that seems to involve what these young people are doing. And it's really kind of weird and mysterious, and you're not totally sure what's going on. I guess this is also a slasher film. I said I haven't seen a slasher film, but I feel like this is like a version of a slasher film. Sort of. Like, it draws a little bit on that. I'm not totally sure how I feel about the ending of the movie. It definitely wasn't what I was expecting. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear from those of you who've seen Cabin in the Woods, like, what did you think of the twists? What did you think of the ending? And then how do we want to rate these? We're gonna do 2 ratings. We're gonna do stars for overall enjoyment and like Jason masks for scariness. We'll see. I think we can make this work. Okay, in terms of scariness, honestly, I didn't find this very scary. I was definitely intrigued by it. I was trying to figure out what was going on. I was curious. There were a couple of moments that I was like, oh God, like when they went down into the basement for the first time, and I was like, what is it gonna be? But like, I didn't find this movie particularly scary. And even the more like gory scenes, it was just so over the top. I didn't find it scary. It was just kind of silly, if that makes sense. There was just so much of it, and it didn't feel personal. So in terms of my personal scary rating, I'm gonna give this 1 Jason mask. I didn't think it was super scary. However, in terms of enjoyment, I would give this 4 stars. I definitely had a good time with this. It kept me intrigued. I was curious about the plot. I was excited to see what was going to happen, and like thought some of the little things that they did were funny and clever, playing on different tropes. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. I wouldn't necessarily call it super scary, although to be honest, your mileage is going to vary. Part of this probably just depends on what you find scary. But for a movie that I was expecting to be like terrifying, it really wasn't. So maybe, okay. I guess I'll give it like 2 Jason masks. There were a handful of scenes that were more creepy, spooky, where you know something is gonna go wrong, and I could see it being a little scary if I like hadn't been consuming more horror media, I guess, but I just wasn't particularly scared by it, but I enjoyed it and I'm glad that I watched it. So I will be back with you guys once I have watched film number 2 and we'll talk about it. Hello, it's been a couple of days. Let's talk about I Know What You Did Last Summer, because it was such a fun and interesting movie to watch. I got such a kick out of it. Honestly, there were some scenes where I laughed out loud, and as a teenager, maybe I wouldn't have, but now, like, I just was like, okay, this is really entertaining. For instance, the scene where Sarah Michelle Gellar's character wakes up to have had the serial killer like hack all her hair off and put her crown on her head, and she freaks the hell out. I just like burst out laughing, okay? I think this is a really interesting movie, right? Because it's a slasher film for teenagers that is clearly trying to teach you a lesson about honesty and drunk driving and maybe being like promiscuous, I guess. Like that seems to be the thing, right? That like the girl who dies is the more promiscuous one. And man, like what a star-studded cast we have here. This gave me all the flashbacks to what it was like growing up in the 90s, because oh my god, this movie is so 90s teenager vibes, and I like the nostalgia on this is real. And I hadn't realized that Johnny Galecki has a role in this film. You might know him from The Big Bang Theory, but he plays a side character in I Know What You Did Last Summer, and when he died, I was not expecting it. I was like, whoa, what? Like that was probably the thing that most took me by surprise. But overall, this movie was just a lot of fun. I feel like, again, if I had been a teenager when I watched it, I would have found it a lot more scary, because I think if you're in the middle of like living that experience of being a dumb teen, then yeah, this is super creepy. But as an adult, I mean, honestly, they're kind of dumb too, because at the beginning of the movie, they throw the guy in the ocean and leave him there, and he's not dead. And they just assume that he's drowned. And I'm like, clearly he's not dead. Like, why would you think you're now suddenly safe? This seems really dumb. And, you know, the way that gets unraveled in the rest of the movie is fun. So yeah, this was a blast. And when I went to watch it, because it's on Amazon Prime, come to find out they're doing a remake. So now I'm kind of curious to watch the remake and see how they tackle it. It's interesting to me that they're now going back and remaking so many things from this time period, from like the 90s, and I'm interested to see what they do with it. Some of them are not so much hits. Like I've seen the reviews of He's All That, which is like a take on She's All That, and it doesn't look great. So I don't know that they're necessarily nailing it all the time, but curious to see what they're gonna do with I Know What You Did Last Summer. But overall, this was a lot of fun. Not super scary, at least for me, although it had a couple of moments. Again, on my scary meter, I would probably give it a 2, and on my enjoyment meter, a 5. Honestly, like, I'm gonna give this 5 stars for enjoyment. I just had such a good time watching this. The nostalgia of the time period, laughing at all of the antics. I just thought it was a really good time. So, success. I watched my first official slasher film, and it was great. It was fun. One thing that I do think is interesting, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I read a couple months back My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones, which in some ways is a love letter to the slasher film. And that book does a good job of educating you on the typical tropes that you see in slasher films. And so having some of that knowledge going into I Know What You Did Last Summer was interesting and informative, because I could see things like, okay, clearly the girl who's more like nice and bookish and not super into her sexuality is going to be the one who's not going to die, which, surprise, surprise, that was the case. Also, if you notice, Jennifer Love Hewitt is almost always dressed in shades of white, which is funny. They put her in more modest clothing that's colored white, so like the imagery is very heavy-handed, that it's clear she is the good one who's going to survive to the end, which I found interesting. It was interesting having some knowledge of what these movies do, of having a character who believes they're wronged and are taking revenge in a pretty extreme way, which obviously you got in this movie. You have the final girl who has to kind of go through this metamorphosis and find her inner strength in order to survive. You saw that happen. So it was interesting, like, knowing some of those things going in and then being able to see it play out in real time watching the film. It's a little bit reverse of maybe what I think a lot of people do, but it was fun. So I loved it. I was a fan. I am excited to watch more, and I will be back with you when I watch the next movie. Tonight I have my husband with me. We're going to be watching The Final Girls from 2015. Let's do it.
All right.
All right, we did it.
Yep.
It was funny.
It was pretty funny.
It was pretty funny. I will be back with a full review at a later date. Hello, I am here to talk about The Final Girls. Also, I should have done this like a week ago, and then I realized I forgot to make this clip. So we're doing it now. This movie was fantastic. I had such a good time with it. It's a horror comedy. It's got a lot of heart to it. It's got that typical like slasher thing, but with this weird thing of them like going back in time into an actual slasher movie that the girl's dead mom had been an actress in. So there's like this whole like kind of heartwarming, honestly, plot of her reconnecting with her mom as she's playing this actress and like fighting down the bad guy. But it's got so many hilarious things because it like literalizes stuff that happens in movies, which is so funny. So like when there's a flashback, everything turns into black and white, and like they go in loops when they're like not doing what they're supposed to be doing in the movie. And I don't know, I got the biggest kick out of this. I thought it was so much fun. And then it was fun too because we got to the end and they're like in the hospital and stuff, and I told my husband, I was like, I bet it's not over. I bet they're in the sequel. And he was like, what? No. And I was like, I bet I'm right. And I was totally right. I was like, did I call it or what? Because it was a double feature. The night that they like fell into the film, it was a double feature. There was supposed to be a part 2 that they were going to watch. So that was fun. I just got a huge kick out of this. I thought it was a really good time, and I'm definitely glad that I saw it. I do feel like this is more entertaining if you've seen other slasher films and you know how it's kind of playing around with these tropes. But yeah, who knew? Who knew that I would enjoy the slasher genre as much as I am? Like, I now have finished this project and watched a few for it, and I enjoyed all of them. And there's, as much as they are horror, there is something kind of comforting about the fact that you sort of know how it's going to end. Like, there is some level of a formula of, like, this final girl is going to find her inner strength and survive and take down the bad guy. And, like, that's very comforting. I don't know. Anyway, I'm enjoying them. Who knew? I certainly didn't. Okay, so we got to talk about scariness versus enjoyment. This is another one I'm going to give like a 2 to the scary bits. There were some like, slightly scary moments. It wasn't particularly scary, more entertaining, at least for me, than scary. But a little bit on occasion. And it just also was just like playing with all these funny things about like the final girl having to be a virgin, and like it does a nice job of like leaning into the more questionable elements of these traditional tropes, which I appreciated. So yeah, I give this a 2 in terms of scariness. And I mean, this is like a solid 4 or 5 in terms of enjoyment. I had a really good time with it. I'm definitely glad that I saw it. It was great. And the cast was fantastic. So would recommend this one if you haven't seen it. Hello, everybody. So we are about to watch the original Halloween from 1978. We're doing a patron viewing party thing, so I'm gonna live react. It's gonna be great. I'm excited. I've got it all rented from Amazon. We're gonna chat for a few minutes, and then afterwards I'll give you my initial reactions and then be back for more of a full review later. We just finished. It was fun. Big lesson I think I took away from this is keep a weapon. Don't throw away the knife until the police are actually there. It was a good time. Hello, it is the next day and I am here to talk about Halloween. This movie was really interesting to watch. The opening scene is super creepy because you're literally in the perspective of the child. And then when I saw how little he was, I was like, oh my goodness, that's like really creepy and weird, which obviously it's kind of intended to be. I will say, and look, it was the 70s, I get it, but like part of me watching it today, the way that they talk about him, knowing that he was 6 years old when he originally did the murder, I'm like, he's a child. He's not evil. He probably needs like therapy and medication. I mean, obviously something is wrong. Many things may be wrong, but that doesn't mean that people with issues are just like pure evil who must be locked away forever. Not to mention the fact that like you locked him away starting when he was 6 years old and you wonder why he still has issues. Like, you know, just saying. Anyway, I get it. I get that it's a movie, but part of me is kind of like, we have great mental health representation here. Yeah, it's good. Jamie Lee Curtis. Man, she is fantastic, and her acting ability is great. I can see why she is still around and some of her little friends aren't. Like some of their acting with that dialogue, I was like, this is so cheesy, but she did an amazing job. She did a really, really good job with this role. It's so interesting to see her so young with like the Farrah Fawcett hair, all the like 70s vibes, the cars and the like corded phones and stuff were fun. I had a really good time watching this and like talking through it with my patrons because we did like a live thing. We were each watching the movie individually, but I was like giving commentary throughout it, and so that was really fun to do. And yeah, overall, I think doing this project has really whet my appetite to watch more slashers and read more about them because I think they're pretty fascinating as a cultural object or something to unpack because they're this mix, right, of in some ways being stories about controlling the behavior of young women. In Halloween, you have the same thing where it's like the virginal young woman who is bookish and smart is the one who survives. The like ditzy sleeping with their boyfriends girls are the ones who die. So, and it always seems to be teenagers, like correct me if I'm wrong, but based on what I'm seeing so far, it's always teenagers and always teen girls, young women. So like on the one hand, it's a little interesting to me that we're like taking the women who are more in touch with their sexuality and then creating this like very violent response to it. But by the same token, you have this final girl trope, which is interesting because on the one hand, yes, she's like virginal and whatever, but also she's got this interesting character arc of finding her own inner strength so that by the end of the movie, she can stand up to the slasher and stop him, and maybe is the only person who can. It's interesting because it's like both sexist and feminist at the same time, I guess, and I am sure there have been papers written on this, but watching these movies has definitely made me interested in reading about that, and I kind of want to, at some point, go back and reread My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones because that was part of what got me interested in wanting to watch slashers in the first place. I had never seen them because I thought they would be too scary, and like, I will note, this was definitely more scary than I Know What You Did Last Summer. Or scare level, I should do my levels. Scary, I'm gonna give it like a 3 out of 5. It had a lot more tense, scary moments. I wasn't terrified though. And I think part of it was talking my way through it and like trying to like unpack, okay, why were the filmmakers making certain choices and like what's happening? Like that was really fun for me. I enjoy watching movies that way. So 3 out of 5 for scariness. Enjoyment, I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5. I had a pretty good time watching it. I mostly enjoyed it. There were also some funny moments and moments where I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, guys, can we just say like a good lesson to take away from the original Halloween is if you have a weapon like a knife, don't throw it away until like there's police there, because the guy's probably never dead. And why would you like, she does this twice in this movie where she like has the knife and then he's down and she's like, okay, I'm gonna throw the knife away and leave it next to him. No, why would you do that? Like, why would you do that? What? And she does it twice. Overall, I think it's a good movie. I can see why it's so iconic. It definitely has some problems. There was like one line that I was like, wait a minute, that's super creepy. And apparently people think it's just a mistake, that like they said the line wrong or something. I don't want to get into this here. It's too disturbing. But anyway, there were like some things. Also, I'm curious, for those of you who maybe know about this, is it the case that when Michael is going to show up, there's always a jack-o'-lantern? Because I noticed there was like a jack-o'-lantern next to the bed with the one couple, and there always seems to be like a jack-o'-lantern when he's going to show up. Is that a thing? Let me know. Also, it's a fire hazard. Why would you have a pumpkin with a burning candle next to the bed and then also smoke in bed after you have sex? Like, it was the 70s. Anyway, it was fun. I had a good time with this, and I am excited for the last movie for this video. So sometime in the next week or so, I'll be watching What We Do in the Shadows, and I will let you guys know my thoughts. Hopefully you're enjoying it. All right, watching the very last movie tonight, What We Do in the Shadows. I guess we'll find out what it is. Okay, you know, probably my least favorite, honestly, of the ones we've watched for this. I'll talk more about it later. I think a lot of this is just going to depend on your sense of humor. It definitely had its moments, but I think, I don't know, it was really long. I probably would enjoy something like this more as sketch comedy, but it was very long. I will be back to discuss. Let's talk about What We Do in the Shadows and then wrap this video up. This may be a controversial take, but I didn't really like What We Do in the Shadows very much. Yeah, I wasn't feeling this. I was pretty bored, honestly. I really liked the intro, and there were certain scenes that I thought were really funny, but this is the kind of thing that I think I would enjoy more as short form sketch comedy. As a full length movie, I was just like, okay, it's kind of old, at least for me. I do think this is the sort of thing where a lot of it depends on your sense of humor. Like, if this is totally your sense of humor, you might love it. I'm sure it was a fun movie to make, and, you know, there are some really clever, entertaining moments, but overall, it was okay. I was like, when we still had 30 minutes left, I was like, how much longer is this movie? Are we done yet? Where is this going? So yeah, you know, unfortunate to end on this, but this was by far my least favorite of all the movies that I watched. So, scariness, I mean, this wasn't particularly scary. This, I feel like, can get a gross rating because there was some like over-the-top goriness that was like gross. So if we want to call gross scary, I guess I might give this like a 3. For that. I didn't really find it scary, but there were definitely some scenes that I was like, ooh, yuck. So it's like a 3 or 4 on that scale. Enjoyment, I'm giving this a 2. I'm giving this a 2. It doesn't get a 1 because there were a few scenes that I genuinely enjoyed and laughed at. I thought the introduction to it was really hilarious, where we have them introduced as flatmates with these different personalities. Like, that I thought was brilliant. There were like moments in the film that were great, but as a whole, it was just too long and too much. I know people really like this, and people seem to particularly love the show. So maybe the episodes are shorter, maybe there's something different about it. Let me know in the comments down below. Given my feelings about the movie, how you think I would do with the show if I wanted to like give that a try at some point. Let me know. So there you have it. I watched 5 horror movies for the very first time. This was overall definitely a success. What did I learn from this? I think I might be a fan of slashers, and I want to watch more of them. This actually has made me interested in maybe going and watching more slasher films and then revisiting My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones to make some kind of a review video that is talking about them in conjunction with each other. I think that would be fun. Or maybe even go through the book and like watch all the films that are referenced in the book. That could be a fun project. I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below if that's something you guys would be interested in seeing from me, because that could be a fun thing to do. I wouldn't have thought this would be a thing I was into, but apparently I am. I really enjoyed my time with those films, and yeah, who knew? I had never seen them before. I'm so glad that I did, and this was a fun project. Talk to me in the comments down below. Let me know any of your thoughts or feelings on the movies that I watched in the video. And for your question of the day, if you watch horror movies or if you've seen slashers, recommend one to me that you think I should watch. And if you're wondering, has she seen this one movie? I can tell you, for slashers, no, I haven't. If the slasher wasn't in this video, I haven't seen it. Like, I haven't seen Scream, I haven't seen Nightmare on Elm Street, like, I haven't seen anything. So if you have recommendations or thoughts, let me know in the comments down below. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.